One of the most misunderstood concepts, I would say, in modern culture at large, is method acting. I would venture to say that 99% of the time when you read an article that talks about method acting, they're probably using it in the wrong way. This is the idea that usually gets portrayed. A self-serious actor who becomes the person they're playing, staying in character, giving an intense performance, and fully immersing themselves in the world of the material. If they're playing a taxi driver, they actually go out and drive taxis for research. If they're playing a ship worker, they go out to sea for months before production. In between setups, they order their lunch in character. Method acting is viewed as an intense devotion to the character. And there's a few names that most often get kicked around in this conversation. Daniel Day-Lewis, Joaquin Phoenix, and Leonardo DiCaprio, just to name a few. But none of these actors are actually method, at least in the examples that we're talking about. That's because method acting isn't some amorphous term used to describe the devotion an actor has to a role. It's an actual process that can be defined, learned, and used in scenes. This video is going to be heavily relying on the incredible scholarship of Isaac Butler's book, The Method, which I highly recommend. Also, before we delve in deeper, if you're enjoying this video and you want to see more videos about movies and filmmaking, then be sure to subscribe. So what is method acting? In his book, Butler says, "The method is not merely an acting theory or a reliable way to cry on cue. It is a transformative, revolutionary, modernist art movement, one of the big ideas of the 20th century." It was originated in Russia by Konstantin Stanislavski, who came up with the system. He did this because when you're acting in a play, if you give an amazingly truthful, powerful performance, you need to be able to reliably recreate that magic the next night, and every night after that for the entire run of the show. The main revelation was his idea that the crux of a truthful performance was tapping into your real, personal experiences. Stanislavski built his new grammar of acting on two essential principles. The first was the primacy of the actor's own life experiences. Painters had paint, writers had words, actors had their lives. Across the pond in New York, Stanislavski's torch was taken up by Lee Strasberg and his acting studio. He pioneered what we today know as the method. On strasberg.edu, it says, quote, "At its core, method acting is a systematic approach to training the living material that is the actor's instrument. The use of one's own life experiences in the creative imagination infuses each choice with genuine thought, desire, sensation, action, and feeling, resulting in psychologically in-depth behavior. The method trains actors to use their physical, mental, and emotional self in the creation of a character and stresses the way in which personal experience can fire the actor's imagination. It eschews cliches and pursues individual authenticity and a reality deeply grounded in the circumstances of the script." Okay, that all sounds great, but what does that actually look like? Essentially, method acting is tapping into the pool of memories and experiences from your own life in order to build a performance. This is kind of a reductive example, but say you're playing a scene where somebody you know has died. Instead of just playing a cliche of what you think a grieving person does, wailing, screaming, whatever, the method says that you should examine your own past experiences to guide your performance. It doesn't even have to be somebody dying necessarily. Maybe when you were a child, you lost your favorite toy on a trip. You would examine that memory, see what your reaction was, try to reconstruct in your mind what you felt, saw, smelt, and then use those visceral memories to get you to the place where you can honestly and truthfully portray loss. In many ways, what we're describing is the polar opposite of what so many people imagine method acting to be. It's not Leonardo DiCaprio sleeping inside of dead animal carcasses during the shoot for The Revenant to bring him closer to the world of the movie. It's using sense memory to bring the movie closer to you. All the other stuff can be valid work for an actor, be it research or wanting to familiarize yourself with the world of the story, or staying in character after a director yells cut, but it's not method acting. I think in part why these kinds of anecdotes get blown out of proportion and why so many people conflate intense research or staying in character with method acting is because of all the crappy journalism that misportrays it. Instead of actually doing their jobs and doing research, say calling the acting studio or an expert like Isaac Butler to find out what method acting actually is, they just regurgitate stories of Daniel Day-Lewis and the wacky method stuff he does on set. But even he himself pushes back against this whole narrative.
It seems so clear to me that if I and most of my colleagues really do the same thing in different ways maybe, but we go to these great lengths to try and create a world for ourselves. And within that world, we try and create an understanding of the lives that we're expressing in that world. And for me, that's where the pleasure of the work is. So what would seem crazier to me is to jump in and out of that world, or in and out of the experience of that character, because that's really where I want to be.
The mythology of what these actors do to get into character from the outside might appear silly and weird, but the way that I feel about it is, honestly, who cares? Who cares what Daniel Day-Lewis does to get where he needs to be? Does anyone obsess over how many push-ups LeBron James does in the offseason? No, you just trust that he does what he needs to do to be really good at basketball. Where this style of acting becomes problematic is when it interferes with other people's ability to do their job. I'm thinking of the stories of Jim Carrey in Man on the Moon, where he would stay in character as Andy Kaufman and harass and abuse the cast and crew, which, like, okay, I get it. Andy Kaufman had the reputation for being abrasive and difficult to be around. But Anthony Perkins managed to act in Psycho without actually killing anybody. So I think you can figure it out. No matter what your process is, you don't have the right to abuse other people. These are your coworkers after all, and there's a limit to what you're allowed to do for the sake of your art. I'm also thinking about an actor like Jared Leto, who for Suicide Squad claims to have sent gifts to his co-stars from the Joker, including rats, anal beads, and used condoms.
I mean, I did a lot of things to create a dynamic, to create an element of surprise, of spontaneity. I mean, the Joker is somebody who doesn't really respect things like personal space or boundaries.
I think that this is the kind of hijinks that people think of when they scoff at the idea of method acting. But in reality, this kind of stuff is a total joke and has nothing to do with actual method acting. Just because you think that this is what you need to do to develop your character doesn't mean that it's a part of anyone else's process. Again, you don't get to harass, assault, or impede anyone else's ability to do their job because you wrongly view yourself as a brave method actor. This is a myopic, narcissistic, self-serious view of things, and again, shows a profound misunderstanding of what the method actually is, as exhibited by Jared Leto in this interview.
It's really just a way to stay incredibly focused and committed and concentrated. It's a way to kind of shut everything else out and to prioritize what's important. That's really another way to describe going method.
Lee Strasberg railed against this over and over and over during his career. Butler again quoting Strasberg. You've heard actors say, hit me, hit me. If you won't hit me, I won't get it. Well, that's not acting. Sure, if I hit you, you're gonna fall down. What's the acting in that? The whole point is that I seem to hit you. And yet the way in which I hit you is so believable that you fall down and you are hurt, and I haven't even touched you. Remaining in character at all times, which evolved as a workaround for maintaining your preparation in the hurry up and wait atmosphere of a movie set, greatly distressed Strasberg. All these tales of people going method seem to be more geared towards publicity than achieving a good performance. I get it, it makes good copy. People really get into a lather when they hear tales of Daniel Day-Lewis living in a tent or whatever. And this cuts both ways. Brian Cox has made headlines for his grumpy takes about the supposed method acting of his Succession co-star Jeremy Strong, saying, quote, I don't hold a lot of the American having to have a religious experience every time you play a part. It's crap. He's channeling a long line of classically trained British actors skeptical of method acting. There's a fabled tale of Laurence Olivier talking to Dustin Hoffman on the set of the movie Marathon Man. Olivier asked Hoffman how he was doing, and Hoffman told him that he had filmed a scene in which his character was supposed to have been up for 3 days straight. So what did you do? Olivier asked. Well, I stayed up for 3 days and 3 nights. And then Laurence Olivier gave his famous response, "Why don't you just try acting?" But actual method actor Sally Field did an interview calling Cox out for not actually knowing what method acting is, saying it's not some self-indulgent hippy-dippy religious experience, but it's a tool. She said Strasberg told them, "You don't need to do these exercises for every role. If it works to just pretend, then just pretend." I think what Brian is talking about is people not knowing. They're either not knowing what the method is or not knowing how to use it. And for the record, Jeremy Strong correctly does not consider himself a method actor, saying, "If I have any method at all, it's simply this: to clear away anything that is not the character and the circumstances of the scene. And usually that means clearing away almost everything around and inside you, so that you can be a more complete vessel for the work at hand." This again is the polar opposite of what the method actually is. So here is the thing. Acting is so hard. When you watch movies or TV or plays, we all take it for granted. Good acting, or even just passable acting, when it obscures the process and the seams of its creation, is nearly impossible. If you've never tried to act, I would highly recommend it. It's unbelievably humbling. The few times that I've tried to do it, I've been so bad because I think that my initial impulse is towards shallow broadcasting of what I think an emotion should be. This is how somebody acts when they're annoyed. This is how somebody acts when they're angry. This is why when I see good acting, truly good acting that is honest and powerful and present, I am just blown away. A recent example that I keep returning to is Andrew Scott in All of Us Strangers. He gives such a heartbreakingly honest and present and truthful performance. It looks like he's not acting and actually just experiencing everything. It's a perfect example of Sanford Meisner's quote that acting is behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances. I have no idea what tools Andrew Scott uses to allow him to achieve that performance. But here's the thing, it doesn't actually matter. No matter what goes on in an actor's mind while they're working, it isn't germane at the end of the day. What really matters is what goes on screen. So if an actor has to do tons of research, if they want to stay in character, if they want to work only in the moment, or do what Brian Cox says and just act, who cares? As long as what comes up on the screen is compelling and truthful, it shouldn't matter what goes on under the hood.